I'm Dave H. with a sobriety date July 23rd, 2004. This was originally presented as a talk at District 4's Founders Day Picnic, June 7th, 2025 at George Wythe State Park between Waterloo and Cedar Falls, Iowa for AA's 90th anniversary. Co-founder Bill Wilson was born November 26, 1895 in a small Vermont town and got sober December 11, 1934 at age 39 after his third treatment. He had visits from childhood friend and former drinking buddy Ebby Thatcher. Ebby had been helped into recovery by men from the Oxford group. Read more about Bill's story in the big book, the AA book, Pass It On, and numerous non-AA biographies that go deeper into other issues. Remember that Bill wrote in How It Works, We Are Not Saints. Bill was sent on a business trip to Akron, Ohio during the summer of 1935. He was sober 7 months and armed with advice from his wife Lois and Dr. William D. Silkworth to reach out and help others to get his mind off himself. Dr. Silkworth told Bill to quit preaching to drunks because it didn't work. Instead, stress the obsession of the mind and allergy of the body. Just tell his own story along with some of the Oxford group's process. At risk of relapsing, Bill reached out to Akron preachers to find a drunk to help. And he was put into contact with a member of the Akron Oxford group who connected him with a hopelessly drunk surgeon, Dr. Bob Smith. Dr. Bob was born August 8, 1879, also in Vermont. He had tried the local Oxford group, but was put off by its attention-grabbing evangelical approach. After telling Dr. Bob the outline of a recovery program adapted from the Oxford group ideas and helping him through what we know today as steps 4 and 5, Dr. Bob resumed drinking on a business trip. Early on June 10, 1935, after days of detoxing, Bill handed Dr. Bob a bottle of beer to steady his hands for a surgery. The rest of the day, Dr. Bob went about town making amends and never had another drink. Thus, June 10, 1935 is not only Dr. Bob's sobriety date at age 56, but also the founding of AA, the first time one alcoholic helped another get sober using what would become the 12 steps. The two began working on drunks in Akron, starting what turned out to be AA Group Number 1. Bill returned home to New York City and began working with more there. He established Group Number 2 with Hank P., born in Marion, Iowa, who helped Bill start a business and later helped fund the printing of the Big Book. As the groups grew, the press began to take note, and soon new groups were forming. A central office was started, and people from across the country visited Akron or New York City to solve their alcohol problem, taking the solution back home with them. The book Alcoholics Anonymous was first published in 1939 to help spread the word accurately to more cities. On June 10, 1945, over 2,500 AAs gathered in Cleveland for a 2-day 10th anniversary. For part of it, 400 traveled to Akron for a Founders Day dinner. Back in 1945, Bill told the crowd that June 10th was a day for congratulations, for Thanksgiving, and for celebration. Read more about the history in the books Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers and AA Comes of Age, or visit the AA archives online. Founders Day continues to be celebrated 90 years later in Akron on the weekend nearest June 10th. Now AA moves westward to Chicago, Kansas City, Omaha, then Des Moines. Earl T. of Chicago first heard of AA in January 1937. His dad suggested he contact Akron, but Earl tried on his own for 9 months before traveling to Akron. Dr. Bob became his sponsor, and he worked the steps before he returned to Chicago. Without group support, he resumed drinking after a few months, and after several returns to Akron, he met 2 other men from Chicago, and the 3 new friends got sober by the spring of 1939 and began gathering names for a meeting. When the Big Book was published in April of 1939, national publicity quickly attracted others, and the first Chicago meeting was held on September 20, 1939 in Earl's suburban Evanston apartment. After 2 months, it moved to downtown Chicago and added additional weekly meetings. With more national publicity for AA, including news of the Rockefeller dinner, the Chicago group began handling 12-step calls to surrounding states. Earl's story is in the Big Book as he sold himself short on page 258 of the 4th edition. It was Earl who suggested to Bill Wilson that AA needed group guidelines, which were later published as the 12 Traditions. Johnny P. went from Chicago's Skid Row to sober AA member. In April of 1941, at 9 months sober, his job as candy salesman transferred him to Kansas City, and he took the AA program with him. He had 3 letters from Kansas City to New York asking for help after the Saturday Evening Post article. The 4 met to organize, then ran an ad in a newspaper announcing weekly meetings, and by August had to move to a bigger room. In early 1943, Jim C., a member of that Kansas City group, moved to Omaha, and at the suggestion of his sponsor, ran an ad in the World Herald to start a meeting. That February, it was started by Jim and 3 newbies. 10 more joined them by October 1943 when they registered with AA as a group. On a train trip westward that month, Bill and Lois Wilson attended a meeting and dinner in Omaha. AA comes to Iowa. The first attempt to start AA in Des Moines involved 4 men in October 1941, but it fizzled out soon. In the next 2 years, AA in New York had several loners reaching out for help from Des Moines, Boone, and Ottumwa. On October 12, 1943, a married couple from the Chicago AA group went to Des Moines to conduct the first of 2 organizational gatherings at the Des Moines YMCA. It failed to take off, but 2 brief notes about the effort appeared in a newsy Des Moines Tribune column by Ted Ashby, who volunteered to forward any questions to the Chicago couple. At the same time, a Polk County attorney with a drinking issue was looking for a solution. Ray Harrison, now considered the father of AA in Iowa, had prosecuted many drunks in the capital city. One was Don F., who was jailed 78 times in 1 year in the 1930s for public drunkenness. Don moved to Omaha in 1943 and found a newly formed AA group there. When Don was 2 weeks sober, he was asked by the New York office to contact Ray. He took the train to Des Moines to give Ray a Big Book and acquaint him with the program. He discovered that Ray had been sober on his own for a month. Ray read the entire book in one night and called Don to invite him to come back to Iowa to talk more about the program. Don was in Des Moines the next day, and the first official AA meeting in Iowa was held in Ray's office on October 29, 1943, 2 weeks after the failed meeting at the Y. There was Ray, 1 man from the YMCA attempt, 3 others, 2 of whom were drunk, and Don from the Omaha area chairing. The men exchanged phone numbers and planned a second meeting at Ray's home, which had 8 members plus 2 non-alcoholic guests. The third meeting at another home had 17 people, including 4 taking a train from Omaha. The group soon outgrew homes, began meeting in the Bishop's cafeteria basement, and got a post office box. An article about the new AA group before the tradition of anonymity named Ray Harrison as the local organizer, which caught the eye of an old friend in Waterloo, dentist Harvey D., and we'll have more about him later. By 1944, the Des Moines group formed Iowa's first Alano Club, which couldn't find a permanent home until 1955, when the White House was purchased and repurposed. Ray Harrison began reporting the activities of the thriving Des Moines group directly to Bill Wilson in New York. They exchanged communications and became good friends. Ray also started a local newsletter using the name Hildegard as author of group updates and bedtime stories. Later, Ray became a judge, and when a drunk was being sentenced and could not or would not go to AA, they were sent to Ray's special court class for alcoholics, the first of its kind in the country. Throughout 1944 and into the next decade, Ray was joined by AA members Emil, Russ, and Shaq, often called the Four Horsemen of AA, traveling the state by train using names provided by headquarters in New York to plant seeds. Marshalltown, Waterloo, and Burlington were the first meetings outside Des Moines in January of 1944, with Burlington and Waterloo both meeting January 10th. Waterloo was officially registered as Iowa's number 3 group, so either Marshalltown or Burlington got their group registration to New York before Waterloo. The first meeting in Cedar Rapids was a few weeks later, on March 23, 1944. Supported by 4 men from Waterloo, Ray from Des Moines, 9 locals, and 2 ministers. That was soon followed by Sioux City, Newton, Davenport, and a second group in Des Moines. In 1945, AA's first meeting for women started in Des Moines, and new groups were started in Fort Dodge, Ottumwa, and Dubuque, and in 1946, Marengo. The next 2 years saw AA expand into northwest Iowa at Spencer, Eskerville, and Storm Lake. On April 14, 1946, the Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, and Marengo groups co-hosted a banquet in Iowa City featuring talks by Dr. Bob from Akron, Ray Harrison from Des Moines, and a newly sober Dubuque judge. A convention held in Des Moines in 1948 featured AA co-founder Bill Wilson and his wife Lois, who would soon start Al-Anon. Bill proclaimed a great spirit rising in Iowa. A 1957 feature in Look magazine spotlighted Judge Ray Harrison's extensive work helping alcoholics across Iowa, including his courtroom sentencing of chronic drunks to attend AA meetings or Ray's court classes to avoid paying fines. Of note, most of the early meetings in Iowa started at 8 or 8:30 p.m. In small towns, it was so farmers had a chance to get chores done before the meeting. In larger cities, it was because people from other cities often came by train, and that fit better with the train schedules. On to Waterloo, the original group. In Waterloo, dentist Harvey D., known as Doc D., saw Jack Alexander's March 1941 feature on AA in the Saturday Evening Post. He wrote to the New York office a year later asking for help, but did nothing for still another year. In October 1943, he saw the news item by Ted Ashby in the Des Moines Tribune about Iowa's new AA group. He wrote to Ashby seeking help, quote, for a friend, unquote. And a few weeks later, it was answered by the couple from Chicago who had tried to start a group at the Des Moines YMCA. They said they could not make a trip to Waterloo, but they could give him a contact in the capital city. Doc D didn't act on his drinking problem again until he had an especially bad hangover while visiting in-laws in Des Moines for Thanksgiving, 1943. Doc went to a bar to cure his hangover, but found himself unable to take a drink. Instead, he made a call to the number shared in the Chicago letter and left his in-laws' address with the woman who answered the phone. That afternoon, during the holiday dinner, two men from AA knocked on the door. One of them was Ray Harrison, an old drinking buddy of Doc D, who told the dentist about the AA program and gave him the number of a Waterloo couple who had sought help in Akron. On the car trip back to Waterloo that night, Doc and his wife talked about what had happened. Yet Doc still had intentions of going to his club for a nightcap. Instead, he parked the car and never had another drink, declaring November 23, 1943, his sobriety date. Still sick the next day, Doc called the Waterloo couple who sought help and had them meet him in his office. Claude S. and his wife thought Doc should go to the hospital due to his condition, but when he refused, the two men at least agreed they would travel to Des Moines for a meeting soon. On the third day of his horrible hangover, as he was about to give up, he got a letter from Ray in Des Moines giving him words of encouragement. Days later, when Doc had recovered, he and Claude drove to Des Moines to attend their first AA meeting. On the way, they talked about how they were likely not alcoholics after all, but after hearing others in the meeting below Bishop's in Des Moines, the return trip conversation was about being convinced they were real alcoholics. They returned for a second Des Moines meeting to solidify the program in their heads, then set a date of January 10th, 1944 as the first Waterloo meeting. From New York, they got a list of 25 people who had contacted AA for help from the Waterloo area. Doc wrote a note to each, inviting them to the first meeting being held at the Russell Lamson Hotel. No one from the New York list came, but a couple of old drinking friends did, plus a loner from Cedar Rapids, along with Ray Harrison and 5 Des Moines AAs. A Waterloo Courier article, now framed on the wall of the downtown group, 2 days later says that one of the Des Moines AA visitors was a retired police captain who handed out a nickel to each of the men at their first Waterloo AA meeting. Remember that payphones were cheap and plentiful, especially at bars. He told them that if at any time they feel like they need a drink, he must call another member and wait until that member arrives. He went on to say, quote, "If the reason for drinking is convincing enough, the other member will get drunk with him. No one in Des Moines has yet used his nickel," unquote. After another small meeting in the Russell Lamson, weekly meetings moved to Doc's dentist office in the Blackhawk building at West 4th and Commercial Streets, which was torn down in 1975 for the Waterloo Convention Center. When that was outgrown, the group moved across the river to the Gold Room on the second floor of the Hotel President at East Park and Sycamore. In 1945, a one-year, $300 lease was signed for 2 back rooms on the second floor of the building at 529 Commercial, above Rexall Drug, which was also torn down in the 1970s to relocate West 4th Street for a new bridge. In the West Side Archives is a notebook of letters exchanged between Doc D. of Waterloo and Harry C. of Waverly in December of 1945 to help start a Waverly AA group. The first meeting of Waverly was February of 1946 in a bank meeting room. Within the next few months, the Waverly group helped form groups in Olwine, March 19, 1946, New Hampton, the fall of 1946, and in Charles City. A Waterloo Courier article of January 22, 1946, noted that the second anniversary of the Waterloo AA group with its 70 members hosted a celebration of 200 in Black's Tea Room. AA guests came from Minneapolis, Des Moines, Marshalltown, Cedar Rapids, Dubuque, and Sioux City to hear speakers Ray Harrison and a minister from Rome, Georgia. In 1947, another location was at 320.5 East 4th, above what many of us today would know as the former CU restaurant or Brian's on 4th. There was a large meeting room with a small kitchen and a sitting room fit for socializing and playing cards. The facility handled its 100 members, of which 25 came from towns outside Waterloo. The Waterloo Alano Club was first incorporated July 26, 1947. The nationwide nonprofit Society of Alano Clubs allows investors to purchase property controlled by a board of directors, which AA and Al-Anon groups can rent for meetings. Alano stands for Alcoholics Anonymous Organization. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, before it was known as the West Side Group, Waterloo's Brighter Side Group gained national attention when it published a 20-page guide to working the 12 steps called The High Road to Happiness, and a widely circulated, very thick Brighter Side newsletter. The Courier on January 17th of 1949 reported Waterloo's AA's 5th anniversary was held in the banquet room of the hotel president with 300 attending. An ad in the paper that year also promoted a KWWL radio feature on Sunday mornings 10:45 to 11 with members of the Brighter Side group discussing alcoholism and the AA program. In a December 6, 1950 Courier news item, it said Waterloo's Brighter Side AA group had 250 active members and had started a, quote, Negro branch, unquote, meeting at 403.5 Mulberry, now a parking lot at Mulberry and East 3rd behind the Elks Club. The 1950 Waterloo City Directory lists the Brighter Side AA group at 324.5 East 4th, above Gildner's Men's Clothing, more recently Volk's House or Fester's Pub. Brighter Side remained at that site until the fall of 1953, when the Sons of Jacob left their synagogue for a new building, and the old one on West 5th was purchased by the Waterloo Alano Club. In the Courier, May 23, 1953, an article covers Waterloo AA's 9th anniversary, attended by 200 at Electric Park Ballroom, featuring guest speaker Jim O., a Chicago attorney. The next day, there was an open house at the group's new club room at 613 West 5th Street. Also in 1953, a second Waterloo meeting location opened at East 5th and Lafayette in the basement of the Ellis Hotel. That meeting on Saturday evenings was timed for third shift workers who couldn't make it to the main meeting on Wednesdays at West 5th. An Al-Anon group was also held at the Ellis until it was condemned and both groups moved meetings into the West 5th Street building. In 1965, members of the original Waterloo group helped a small group of local business and civic leaders to start a parlor or living room meeting, which afforded them an extra layer of anonymity. The cluster was known to be meeting well into the 1970s, and similar groups have met since then quietly in both Waterloo and Cedar Falls. An interesting Courier article in July of 1969 reported that, based on an anonymous tip, police detectives raided the AA club at 613 West 5th Street. They had looked through the windows to witness an exchange of money during illegal gambling. Men from Waterloo, Dyke, Evansdale, and Oldwine were arrested, and $163.50 was removed from the card table. Today, known as the West Side Group, meetings are daily 10 a.m. except Saturdays at noon, and evenings 7 p.m. daily except Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday. The Come As You Are meeting, which started over a year ago in a small space in downtown Cedar Falls as a young people's meeting, is now at Westside, Sundays at 4 p.m. The first meeting of the Cedar Falls AA group happened January 7th, 1950 at the old VFW Hall on Main Street, organized by Vern M. and Nels F. With quick growth, the meetings moved 2 doors down to 314.5 Main, above the Coast to Coast store. Previously, that second story space had been a bowling alley, but by 1950 it was divided and shared by AA with dentist Donald DeBall, Babe's Beauty Shop, and Amos Scribley's Beauty Shop. The Coast to Coast store later became Parkade True Value Hardware. Today, that is the site of the Stuffed Olive and Roxy's. In May 1974, the Cedar Falls Original Group moved to the old City Recreation Building at 120 East 2nd Street until a fire heavily damaged it on December 23 of that year. For the next couple of months, the group's meetings were moved to Cedar Heights Presbyterian Church at Rainbow and Round, where the Cedar Heights AA meeting was held. Next, the Cedar Falls Original Group moved to a space above an appliance store on Main Street, directly across from the theater. The AA group took a proposal to the City Council to purchase and renovate the burned rec center by removing its heavily damaged second floor. But it was deemed too expensive, and they soon backed out of the deal. The building was torn down. Minor School at 510 Grant Street in the Cedar City section of Cedar Falls was built in 1914, named for a beloved teacher, G.W. Minor. The school closed in 1975 and was purchased by the city with a provision that should the city stop using the building, it would revert back to the school system. In 1976 and 77, the Polk City directories list it as the Minor School Training Center. City directories from 1978 to 81 show the building housed Cedar Falls Operation Threshold and the Police Public Relations Department, with AA and Al-Anon renting the second floor. From 1982 to 85, AA and Al-Anon were the only renters left in the deteriorating old building. With the city no longer using the building, ownership reverted to the school board. According to a Courier story on June 11, 1985, the building was inspected and declared in violation of city code and an expensive liability. The school board didn't want it back, but couldn't sell it without a voter approval. AA couldn't own property according to Tradition 6, but the Courier article explained a compromise. The city would again take ownership, and on June 13, 1985, the Minor School Alano Club was registered as a nonprofit organization with the state of Iowa. The city then sold the old school to the Al-Anon Club for $1, provided it was brought up to code with proper building permits. Now known as the Minor Group, meetings remained at that retired school building until the Great Flood of 2008, which saw muddy water covering the second floor. It was declared a total loss and the property was added to the city park system. The cement 1914 header of the entrance and a door were salvaged as memorials for the group. Within a short time, a temporary location was donated by Ron B. in the back of his Amish peddler business between University Avenue and Falls Avenue in Waterloo. After fundraising efforts, the minor Alano Club was able to purchase and renovate a former feed store at 2513 Center Street in North Cedar on September 16, 2009, where it remains today as Minor 2. Meetings are held at various times every evening, plus a Night Owls meeting at 10 p.m. Fridays, an early bird meeting at 6:30 a.m. Thursday, and a spiritual meeting on Sundays at 10 a.m. Alan B., who got sober in 1969 and has 56 years of sobriety this year, has over the years shared a memory that the downtown group in Waterloo started at the Oddfellows Hall above Levi Brothers at 306.5 East 4th, but wasn't sure when except before 1969. Al has also shared with several of us that AA's spring anniversary in Waterloo at the UAW Hall started as the downtown group's anniversary. In the district archives, now stored at Minor 2, there are pieces to the puzzle of when Waterloo's second group started. There is a ticket for the downtown club's 6th anniversary on April 1 through 3, 1967. In a Courier article, it said that the event locations included the downtown club room in the Courthouse Square building at 620 Lafayette Street, now a lawyer's office behind Roth Jewelers. Other events were held down the street at St. Joseph's Church, with 360 expected to attend. The 7th anniversary event, March 18, 1968, was at the Meatpackers Union Hall, 1651 Sycamore. The Courier reported that 350 attended, with out-of-towners coming from 14 Iowa cities and towns. There is another ticket in the archives for the Downtown Club 8th anniversary, March 22 and 23 of 1969, also at the Meatpackers Union Hall. Those 3 spring anniversaries, celebrated in late March and April, indicated the downtown group started about that time in 1961. A quick check with Waterloo's history shows that the greatest flood in the city until 2008 was March to April of 1961, with a crest of 9 feet over flood stage before the levee system and newer bridges were built. That meant water filled the streets and covered old bridges. Anyone living on the east or north side of the river had no access to AA on West 5th Street for some time. So an educated guess is that spurred the start of the downtown group. Some old-timers often called it the East Side Club, unless they were near a downtown member like Al's wife, Barb B., who sternly corrected them. After the location at 620 Lafayette, it's uncertain if there were other sites before today's long-timers remember the group moving next door and downstairs to 626 Lafayette, the outdoor stairway leading below Roth Jewelers. City directories for Waterloo show that space was rented to the Minority Alcoholism Action Program, or MAP, 1976 to 1978. The space was empty part of 1979 before being listed as the Downtown AA Club, 1980 through the year 2000. By 2001, the meetings of the downtown group were moved to a larger space on the second floor of the Lincoln Park building, 327 East 4th. With plenty of tables, the group began holding monthly potluck meetings, often drawing close to 100 people. After about 15 years there, the building was placed on the National Historic Registry, and rent was increased beyond the group's capabilities. They were able to move into a classroom at People's Clinic on Franklin, and revised the meeting schedule to fit the room's availability until COVID restrictions limited access. The downtown group eventually found a smaller meeting space at 619 Mulberry, provided by Elevate. Downtown group meetings are Wednesday and Friday at 7 p.m. and Sunday at 3 p.m., and they host the monthly District 4 meetings every second Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Cedar Heights Presbyterian Church at Rainbow and Round is where the Cedar Heights AA meetings have been held since they started in May of 1968. The main meeting for years was an 8 p.m. roundtable in the church lounge, attracting several business and civic leaders who needed the anonymity of the program. It got large enough that the group often split into 2 or 3 smaller groups for discussion, with one being down the hall in a Sunday school room with chairs fitting a grade schooler. A step study was started in the church library before the round table, but by early 2000s, both meetings moved down to the fellowship hall. The 8 p.m. group of mostly old-timers faded before COVID and never reopened. The 6:30 group remains a book study on Monday evenings, averaging about 35 people. Jenny A., who now lives in Colorado, told me that she helped start the We Are Not Saints meeting many years ago when she was a guidance counselor at Cedar Falls High School and had some students that needed help. She later taught at UNI and thought that the location at St. Stephen the Witness across from campus would help students there too. It was set for 5:15 Thursday afternoons to help those getting off work at 5 p.m., and it continues there today. There have been several College Hill groups in Cedar Falls. One was listed in meeting schedules at the Wesley Foundation, now called 3 House, on College Hill, Monday nights from 1985 to 1996, but it died shortly after moving to 1 p.m. Saturdays. A few years later, Big Book Study on the Hill was started on Saturdays at 1 p.m. by Robin and John B., also at the Wesley Foundation. But when that time failed to attract people, it moved to 9 a.m. on Saturdays. Around 2004, it was expanded to 90 minutes and started giving big books to newcomers, but again, attendance faded after a few years. About 2014, with only a handful of people left, Eric B., Bob F., and Milo led a reorganization of the meeting back to an hour long and calling it Beginners on the Hill. It began growing and sponsored annual Big Book workshops, bringing in speakers from around the state to speak. As the group grew, it needed a facility that had parking and handicap accessibility, and found that at St. John Lutheran, still on College Street, but a different hill. After COVID, DHS restrictions due to a preschool in the building forced the group to find a new home, and it was at St. Stephen the Witness across from campus. In keeping with the idea of a beginner's meeting, newcomers are still given a complimentary big book, and the group continues to grow, now averaging more than 55 each week. The Grapevine meeting was started by Annie B. in April 2021 at Nazareth Lutheran in Cedar Falls. Each Friday at 6 p.m., there is a discussion on a reading from our monthly magazine and jokes from the humor pages shared by Steve. Doing the Next Right Thing meeting began at Allen Hospital on Saturday nights in 2008. Longtime AA member Lyle H. started it when smoking was still allowed in meetings, and another longtimer, Pat S., had trouble breathing with failing lungs. The hospital offered a smoke-free, handicap-accessible space along with free coffee. COVID put a stop to outside traffic, but the meeting has continued by using Zoom technology. The Allen Monday meeting was started by Allen Hospital as an early afternoon class for alcoholics to which they invited AA members to speak. It was initially advertised by Allen as an alcohol reduction class, but became more widely accepted as a senior AA meeting since it was mostly retired folks. But with AA's sixth tradition against affiliating with a related facility or outside enterprise, Allen's only involvement soon became providing just the room and the coffee. When COVID hit, shutting the hospital down to outsiders, the meeting moved to St. Mark's Church in Evansdale at 1:30 Monday afternoon. Women on Wednesday may have started in the 1990s. Carol says it was going strong when she joined in 2002. They meet Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. at First Methodist in Cedar Falls. The Keep It Simple men's meeting was started by Kent R. and Sean C. in February 2022 at Sean's workshop off Waterloo Road in Cedar Falls, but moved to St. John's Lutheran when Sean moved to Colorado. They continue to meet Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. The Sunrise Group on Fridays at 6:30 a.m. was at Trinity Bible Church on Orchard Drive in Cedar Falls for many years. Member Mark P. believes it was started by John C. in the late 1990s, just before Mark joined. After COVID Zoom meetings, it moved to Cedar Heights Presbyterian, where it is once again growing. The South Main AA group of the early 1990s met at Nazareth Lutheran in Cedar Falls. That group's signage, coin boxes, and big books were given to the Cedar Heights group when the meeting folded. Sometime later, most members of the South Main group got together to form another meeting. Serenity Seekers have met at First Methodist in Cedar Falls since the 1990s, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. While none of the current members knows a start date, early organizers included South Main group members Aaron A., Don H., Mel V., Mike P., Tom R., Helen D., Norm Z., Bob F., and Bob J. Bob J's wife is remembered for going to monthly open meetings for anniversaries and singing a song with her powerful voice for the honorees. The North Side group meetings in Waterloo were held for much of the 1990s and early 2000s at the Jesse Cosby Center and provided a solid outreach to Waterloo's Black community. A couple of men from the North Side group were regulars at the Sunday Night Horizons treatment meeting for several years. The group folded well before COVID. Outside of the Waterloo Cedar Falls area, according to Dennis P., the Evansdale AA meeting started in 1965 at 246 Evans Road above a truck repair shop, then moved to a former bakery on Lafayette. As it grew and needed more space and parking, the meeting found a home in the St. Nicholas Rectory cafeteria. I recall one medallion night in late July 2005, there were over 110 people because everyone knew it would be the last coin for longtime member Curly H., who died of cancer 2 months later. The regular meetings were large enough that it often split into 3 or 4 smaller discussion groups, with one always dedicated to newcomers learning about the first 3 steps in the kitchen. When St. Nicholas was slated for destruction about 2006, the group moved to St. Mark's Methodist, where it still meets Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. The Jessup meeting, according to Mark V., actually started in Dunkerton in 1978, then moved to Jessup and back to Dunkerton. There was an issue with smokers and churches that didn't like smoke. Around 1980, meetings settled in Jessup at the Lutheran Church, and several years later moved to the St. Athanasius School cafeteria, where it has been ever since. The Sunday roundtable is at 7 p.m. Parkersburg started AA meetings in 1968, and David W. says the first meeting was a biker and 5 farmers in their bib overalls. They have diversified a bit since then and have a roundtable Thursdays at 8 p.m. in the Civic Center and an annual recovery anniversary event for AA, NA, and Al-Anon. The New Hartford meeting was started April 13th, 1980 by Paul N. at the town library. In 1981, it moved to the New Hartford School, then to the Oddfellows Hall in 1986. In December of 1986, the group's founder died of a heart attack suffered while chairing the meeting. By the early 2000s, meetings had moved back to the library, where they are today on Sundays at 8 p.m. Tyke meetings have been held off and on for several decades. In the mid-1970s, they were at the Methodist Church, and by 1980 had 20 to 30 regulars. But the group didn't last that decade. Another attempt started in 1995, but it also did not last. A reboot a few years ago may have finally worked with small but regular meetings now at the Methodist Church, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. There was a Hudson AA meeting many years ago. When the current meeting was started in 2009, one of the first to attend was Woody, the happy alcoholic, who remembered early in his sobriety going to a Hudson meeting around Christmas time and being shocked and deeply touched to find nearly 100 people there. That group disbanded after a few years. In 2009, at Horizons Treatment Center, it was noted that there were a couple of Hudson residents in residential treatment and 4 or 5 more in outpatient groups. When they saw each other, they questioned why the town had no meeting. They exchanged phone numbers, and after a couple of organizational gatherings, it took off quickly at St. Timothy Lutheran every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. In Hudson, MHI meetings began with help from Waterloo AA members in 1947. More on that in the treatment section. At some point in the 1970s, people in the town also started a meeting which grew to 3 meetings a week at St. James Church. Hank, who has 40 years, says the meeting was going strong when he started, so that places it well before 1980. Since COVID, meetings have moved into a private room at St. John's Catholic Church, Tuesdays at noon and Wednesdays and Saturdays at 7 p.m. The Washburn meeting was started by Lance and Steve S. in March 2010, before Lance was deployed overseas, and it was nurtured while he was gone by Haley, Jennifer, Steve, and others until COVID. It continues as a Zoom meeting on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. The Winthrop meeting has been off and on for several years with help from the Independence Group, and is currently being held Mondays at 7 p.m. at the Independence Meeting Room. The Traer meeting has been held for many years. Steve F. thinks it may go back to the 1980s or early 90s, and is currently 7 p.m. Thursdays at the United Church of Christ. The Dysart meetings was strong years ago, but as old-timers died, so did the group. Steve F. says it was restarted June 22nd, 2019, and meets on Saturdays at 8:30 a.m. in the Methodist Church. It is now a hybrid meeting with a Zoom option during the in-person meeting. Denver had 2 meetings on Tuesdays for many years, with a discussion group and a step class. The step class continues at 7 p.m. Tuesdays at St. Peter's Lutheran Church. The Grundy Center meeting started there several decades ago, then moved to nearby Holland, Iowa. They are now back in Grundy Center at Orchard Hill Church on Tuesdays, with a step class at 7 p.m. and a round table at 8. And now the treatment centers in this corner of the state. Long before medicine and therapies were developed for alcoholics, drunks in this region were sent to a locked ward for 72 days at the Mental Health Institute, or MHI, in Independence, with patients considered insane. If they had violent DTs, they were likely tied to beds or put in straitjackets. Repeat offenders were eligible for electroshock therapy. After a 1946 service club meeting in Olwine, visited by Governor Robert Blue, at which Waterloo AA member Ed Kay spoke about the inhumane treatment for alcoholics, MHI's chief doctor agreed to have separate quarters for alcoholics with coffee and at least one in-house AA meeting a week with visiting Waterloo AA members, beginning in 1947. More widely accepted treatment programs were later adopted. A recent photo on Facebook from the MHI Museum shows a small meeting room with the 12 steps hung on the wall. A 1965 article in the Courier says that the MHI alcohol treatment program has no time limit and some stay 7 weeks or more with daily group therapy, regular AA meetings, and outpatient follow-up. It reported 770 alcoholics were treated in 1964. In 1977, MHI added a program for drug addicts and soon merged it with the alcohol treatment program. Before MHI improved its handling of alcoholics in 1947, the Waterloo Original Group member Paul P. thought there should be some better kind of treatment. He rented stalls in the horse barn at the National Cattle Congress grounds and donated them to detox and treat drunks. Volunteers cleaned out the stalls, installed cots and a small kitchen. Someone was always there to monitor the recovering drunks, and a mild sedative was mixed with beer to wean them off alcohol slowly. A hot stew was always available, and plenty of AAs would visit to share the program. As the patients improved, they helped keep the stalls clean. When members of the Waterloo Original Group, then known as the Brighter Side Group, decided to improve local detox and treatment, they registered the Waterloo Alano Club in 1947. They obtained a small building at 412 East 4th Street next to the Strand Theater, across from Lincoln Park, now a parking lot next to Waterloo Fiber offices. The Waterloo home was known as the AA Hospital, but members were careful to explain the difference between the AA group and the Alano Society, in keeping with the newly established 12 traditions. Waterloo's Brighter Side Group provided big books and other materials, plus personal visits if desired. The project doesn't appear to have lasted long. Another effort to provide treatment began in July of 1966, when the Northeast Council on Alcoholism, under guidance from the Governor's Commission on Alcoholism, was established to begin providing services for social and heavy drinkers, with counseling from AA volunteers to prevent them from progressing to alcoholics. A year later, the organization renovated a church on Falls Avenue and opened a residential and outpatient treatment center under the name Northeast Council on Substance Abuse, or NECSA. Today, we recognize that program as Pathways Behavioral Services, headquartered on University Avenue, with outpatient offices serving 6 counties. In August 1967, a sober living home for 13 alcoholics opened at 406 Independence Avenue. Green Acres Men's Residence was a 32-month pilot program of the Iowa Comprehensive Alcoholism Project, or ICAP, of the Office of Economic Opportunity and co-sponsored by NECSA. The $125,000 grant included oversight from MHI, and soon after, 4 more ICAP homes opened across Iowa. In May 1971, Green Acres Halfway House was granted a charter for an AA group named the Sedlicek AA Group after Dr. Leo Sedlicek of Cedar Rapids, who became prominent in helping Eastern Iowa alcoholics. State funding for Green Acres ended in September of 1977, and it closed. Pathways has operated a sober living opportunity for several decades, housing people leaving a certified treatment center or being released from Iowa's legal system with recovery time from addictions. Initially, it housed 25 men and women on Western Avenue in Waterloo between West 4th and West 5th Streets, then moved into a former women's clinic at 2014 West 4th, where it is today as the Junkman Noble Center, serving about 12 men. In 1972, Schoitz Hospital at Ridgeway and Kimball opened a wing of its second floor for treatment of chemical addictions. Fondly called 2 North, the Courier reported that the first year saw 280 admissions, with a quarter of them being women. At the time, it was believed to be a first-in-the-nation center for detox and short-term treatment designed to average 10 days. It was initially co-sponsored by the Northeast Council on Alcoholism. After several hospital mergers, the program was named Horizons and eventually moved to its current location on the 5th floor of Mercy One Hospital. Horizons involves many AA members as volunteers to speak in class sessions, and Mercy One Waterloo is the only hospital in the region to have a unit dedicated to detox. The latest addition to local treatment options in 2020 in the Waterloo area is Elevate at Mulberry and East 5th. While it is based on harm reduction theories rather than abstinence, they still support 12-step programs and offer 2 storefronts on Mulberry for use by NA and Downtown AA Group. It offers outpatient counseling, support groups, a mobile crisis response team, plus housing for clients in recovery. District 4 institutional meetings are held at Horizons in Mercy One Hospital on Sundays and Tuesdays at 7 p.m. and at Pathways on University Avenue Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Some historic odds and ends for District 4. When originally organized, Iowa's District 4 of AA extended much further north, including Waverly, Charles City, Olwine, and New Hampton. As AA grew, the giant district was divided into 2. The Bridge the Gap program, connecting treatment center clients with AA members to break the ice of going to meetings after discharge, was brought here in 1978. And our phone answering service, or hotline, began in November of 1985. We also now have a website with information at www.aa-waterloo.org. This week, as we salute those who came before us these past 90 years and sacrificed much more than most of us today would ever consider, let us remember the words spoken by Bill Wilson on the 10th anniversary, that this is a day for congratulations, for Thanksgiving, and for celebration.